Hi, Steve. Here's your Zapier workflow that I've set up for you. I'll just walk through this from top to bottom so you have an understanding of how it works in case you need to change it in the future as well. So step one, we're using updated e-learning registration in Arlo. This is better to use rather than the new e-learning registration, just for future proofing. If you want to have a filter, let's say to proceed only if the registration is approved, you will want to use the updated registration trigger. So that way you can accommodate the changes, from it going from pending approval to approved. Either way, the updated e-learning registration will also work for brand new registrations created in the platform. So it's going to work for both. So step two, after that registration comes in, we have a filter. This is checking for a custom field that I've created against your registrations. So looking at your platform here at a registration I created, here's that custom field. It's a plain text field. Basically, the last step of the Zap will output some data into this field. And this is going to be useful later so that the Zap run does not attempt to be run multiple times. Let's say if you update this registration multiple times, the Zap is going to check to see if anything at all exists in this field. And if it does, it's going to stop. It's not going to do anything else. So for a first run through, would expect nothing exists in that field, and that's how it's going to be. That should be correct. We don't have any other filters in here, but you may want to add some in later. You could, for example, click and choose another field. Let's say if you're looking at the registration status, if you want to make sure that it's approved. And this will depend on how your payment methods are set up, how you create these registrations. But you may want to say that the registration status should exactly match approved. Again, this part's optional. You could take that out of here. The main thing is really just to make sure that that custom field does not have any text within there. And that's what does not exist means. So after that filter step, we've got a code step here. And this is just taking the first name and the last name of the student, and it's setting the first letter of the first name and last name to both be uppercase, and it's concatenating them together into a single string. I found this was needed for another client I implemented this for, because some students will enter in their name all in lowercase, and that causes an issue with the username creation because it expects an uppercase character. So this is a safety measure here. Basically, the code it's pretty simple. It's taking that first name and last name, uppercasing the first characters, and then putting them together into one string and outputting that value. And we can see that here from in my testing. My name was already uppercase, so this wasn't so useful. But you can imagine if those were lowercase names, this is how it should output it. So after that, we've got an action that's going to find and or create the user in Talent LMS. So we're going to find the user based on the email address coming from Arlo. And if no match is found, it's going to proceed with these next steps. The user creation, we're really just defining the first name and last name. We're also defining a login username and a password because these are both required. When the user goes to log in, they can still log in with their email address, so they don't actually need to know that this is their username. They'll probably never really be aware of it. And same thing with their password. In my testing, I found that I received an activation email from Talent LMS. I clicked activate my account, and it took me right into Talent LMS, and I was already logged in as the user. So I never had to enter in this password at all. It's also easy to reset a password. So if that user, for some reason, needs to log back in and they forgot, they can just use the forgot password link. So yeah, I guess what I have done here anyway is set the username as that outputted first name and last name concatenated together into one string. And I also use the Arlo contact ID there. And that's really just to make sure this is unique. No one else is going to share that contact ID. And for the password, I figured it makes sense just to make it the exact same thing. Again, no one's going to know what these contact IDs are unless they have admin access into your Arlo platform. So it should be really safe and secure using these as the backup login name and the password. So this step, in my testing here, it created myself a new user. We've got the user ID here, and all the details are here just in case we need them, but that step should be all good. So next, after it finds or creates a user, we've got a lookup table step here in step 5, and that's utilities formatter step. What this is doing is it's taking the name of the course from that Arlo registration. We've got that here in the lookup key, and it's going to attempt to find a match on the left-hand side, and it will output the ID on the right-hand side, which is the Talent LMS course ID. So to find these IDs, you can either go to Talent LMS and edit one of your courses, and you should see it up in the URL. The other option is to look at number 6 here. This step we can use to retrieve those IDs. So within this course option right here, you can click there, choose course from this option. And these are your Talent LMS courses. You can see the ID falls within just right under each of those course names. So I basically just took note of this before completing that previous step. I noticed that the WM demo is 241 and your work management approved work is 240. So you probably just want to, if you're adding courses later and you want them to be actioned by the Zap, you'll need to update the lookup table. Again, you can go into step 6, look up the course IDs from this course step, and just take a screenshot or note those down so you can put them into the previous step. So again, with work management approved work, it's 240. So I would go into the lookup table step, edit the actions, and I'd make sure that 240 here corresponds with the course name. And this is exactly as it should become from Arlo. So worst case situation, if you need to, I would look at your e-learning names here and just make sure they exactly match the values coming from here. So in this example, the registration I placed is for the work management approved work. It's going to use this lookup table and output 240, and that's going to be used in the next step to add the user to that correct course. So number 6, looking at this in the actions, we can skip over the course name here. We can use basically this course field right here instead to populate them onto that correct course. And this is outputting, basically if we choose that custom step, and then number 5, we're taking the output from that lookup table. So we know we're going to enroll the user into the course ID 240. We've got the username here, or sorry, rather the email address, and they're a learner, and we know their user ID, so we'll populate that in here as well. And so that step should successfully enroll them into the course within Talent LMS. Last thing we have here is an action that's going to update the registration in Arlo. So we are using the registration ID here to populate the correct registration. And you can see the only thing this step is doing is populating this custom field. We're putting in the user ID exactly as it comes from Talent LMS from that previous step, along with the course ID. And the reason I'm using these dynamic values is just to prevent this step from running successfully, let's say if that previous step didn't run. When you just put static text in here, the step could still run successfully even if the previous one failed. So by putting in data from the output of those previous steps, this should only run if the registration really was actioned correctly. And so this population of the custom field, that's what we looked at in the filter step in here. So because the Zap is going to populate that field, and because we've got that filter in the second step, it means that if you update that registration again, let's say if you mark it as passed, it's not going to trigger the Zap run again. So it's going to save you on tasks. It's also going to serve as an indicator to you that that registration was actually actioned. So if we look at the approved work course where I added one and go into this registration, you'll see this here. This means that the registration was actioned by Talent LMS. A user ID was correctly generated. So the user was found or created, and the course ID is also here, meaning that they were enrolled into that course. So if you're looking at registrations in the platform and you don't see anything in here, it means it hasn't been actioned by Zapier. There may have been an error, or it may have been because it was before the SAP was implemented. So you just want to keep an eye on that. Just make sure you don't put anything in here yourself. Don't type anything in here manually because it's going to prevent people from being enrolled into Talent LMS. So that's the Zap run. It should be all good to publish and turn on. I would just disable the other Zap that you have. And one last thing, actually, you may want to update your emails from Arlo. So looking at your e-learning modules like this, if we edit this and go into the communication settings, you've got the instructions email right here. You may want to edit this and just say you'll receive an email from Talent LMS within a few minutes. There'll be an activation link in that email. Just click that email and that's going to log you right into the platform or into your e-learning content. It might also be worth mentioning there that if they need to reset their password, they'll just follow the forgot password link on the login page. So they're not going to know their username or password. Within this email, you might actually say your username is your email address, just to make it nice and simple for them. So there we go. I hope that all makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions or if I can help with anything.